Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the kickoff meeting of the Infrastructure and Energy Collaborative. We are so excited to have all of you with us today and to work with us collectively in new ways to make sure that we have a skilled workforce to propel these important industries forward and to expand economic opportunity. I'm Aaron Fickner, president of the New Jersey Council of County Colleges, and excited to have this opportunity to work with all of you in new ways to make for a stronger New Jersey. I'd like to introduce our partner at the New Jersey Business Industry Association, Chrissy Beauteous. This initiative is funded through the state budget, and we thank the legislature and the governor for their support of this important work. And it is a core partnership between the community colleges and NJBIA, our state's largest industry association. But it's a broad collaborative effort, and it's so exciting to see people here today from four-year colleges and universities, the business community, labor unions, high schools, community-based organizations, workforce development, proprietary schools. So thank you all for joining us. And with that, I will introduce and turn it over to Chrissy Beauteous for some opening remarks. Good morning, Chrissy.
Good morning, Aaron. How are you? Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Whoop. Somehow my camera shut off. Good morning, everyone. So great to see you. And as Aaron mentioned, we're really pleased to be having this partnership with New Jersey's community colleges so that we can ensure that we have the workforce for the future. And very excited about today's conversation, really focused on a key economic driver in the state, which is our infrastructure and energy fields. I know that you're going to hear a lot about current labor market data from my colleague, Kyle Sullender, who will present momentarily. But what's so critically important about this initiative and why BIA is very excited about this partnership is that we have constantly heard from our membership that we have unfilled jobs and have a workforce that needs to be trained not only for those jobs of today, but also those of tomorrow. And working with our community colleges, as well as our stakeholders and colleagues from labor, academia from 2 years, 4 years, our private and career technical schools, as well as our government partners from both the executive and legislative branches, we know that we can do this together. We know there's a lot of initiatives going around the state to try to upskill and reskill a workforce moving forward, but that collaboration is key. And to have the business community at the table to help inform what that looks like is really monumental moving forward. And so I look forward to this, start of this collaboration, specifically in this particular industry. And I know that we have a lot of great work ahead of us. So look forward to working with you all moving forward. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. Good to see you. And thank you for your leadership and all of NJBIA really leaning in on this issue in partnership in new ways. So thank you. Appreciate your work and your colleagues' work and involvement in this effort. So today is the kickoff meeting for the Collaborative for Infrastructure and Energy. And the collaboratives, as you all may know, have two important focus areas. The first is to get better information and disseminate better information on the changing economic landscape and workforce needs in the infrastructure and energy fields. And so today we're kicking off that work with a presentation from Focus New Jersey and the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, doing some level setting on data in this field so we have a better sense of where we start. And we are committed throughout this entire effort to continue to partner with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development and Focus New Jersey and other partners to bring good quality labor market intelligence information to this discussion. Obviously, the input of employers is key. And as many of you may know, we are also convening an industry leadership team of about 10 to 12 corporate and union leaders that will guide this entire effort. That work is all going to culminate in at the end of this 12-month period with the development of a strategic workforce plan that will use all of your input and all the labor market intelligence to lay out some recommendations of the types of things that we need to continue to do to make sure that we have the workforce to help propel the move to a renewable energy economy, to make sure that we have the workforce, to make sure that we've got a high-class infrastructure to support our economy and our lifestyles. The second part of the collaboratives is the other piece for why we are all here. The collaboratives are a forum for all of us to come together to share promising practices, to find new models of collaboration. As Chrissy said, we recognize that to meet the challenges that we face as a state and the opportunities, that none of us can do this alone. It's going to take creative partnerships between high schools, community colleges, four-year college partners, workforce development, business, labor, proprietary schools, community-based organizations. And this is the forum to bring us all together to begin to talk about what are the innovative models that are there that we can expand, and what other models are out there that we can develop collaboratively. We hope that there will come a time in the not too distant future that we can have some of these meetings in person to allow for the kind of networking that we know happens organically when we're together. But we'll also have meetings virtually to allow more of us to participate and reduce your drive time. So we'll try to balance both of those. The other half of the Pathways Initiative is the establishment of centers of workforce innovation. And we are establishing 2 centers in this field, one in renewable energy and one in construction. Both of the centers will be led by teams of community colleges with four-year college, high school, and other partners to develop new curriculum and program models that can be shared widely across the state. So we are so excited that all of you have chosen to join us today for this important kickoff of this really exciting moment to make sure that we have this workforce that can propel the renewable energy economy that can keep pace with our infrastructure needs. So I am really proud now and happy to introduce my friend and colleague at the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, Leslie Hirsch. Leslie is the Assistant Commissioner in the Office of Research and Information. And for those of you who do not know Leslie, Leslie is a national thought leader in how to use labor market information and employment information and data and intelligence to drive decision-making at all levels. And we are so happy that Leslie is a partner with us in this effort, and happy to turn the table over to Leslie for some opening remarks and her perspective on where we are in this moment and where we go from here. So thank you, Leslie, for your partnership and your leadership and your innovation. Look forward to your remarks and look forward to working with you and your team.
Thank you. Wow, what a wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to it. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here. Congratulations on the launch. With this initiative, the state made a critical and exciting investment in community colleges, four-year colleges, workforce training in general. And it's critical because it comes at a time when, for those of you who are familiar with Moore's Law is in effect, right? The power and speed of a microprocessor doubles every 2 years. What does that mean? That means that technology changes and the shelf life of skills around technology shortens as well as a result. So community colleges are in an excellent position to fulfill that need and help people pick up skills quickly. It's also critical because it comes at a time when we realize that if we don't serve everyone, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people with disabilities, for example, we haven't done our jobs. And we will never reach the level of economic strength and equity that is within our grasp and within our potential. And colleges and the workforce, we'll call it the ecoverse instead of the ecosystem. The colleges and the workforce ecoverse are in an excellent position to work on that. And I said it was critical and exciting. So it's exciting to me because we're doubling down. 10 years ago or so, I remember that I worked within the City University of New York system, which is now 27 colleges. And I remember giving a presentation about labor market information and meeting a whole lot of resistance. But I know that we've entered into a paradigm shift. We're not just driven by student demand anymore. We know that we absolutely have to understand the labor market. And since no one can know everything about the labor market, we have to specialize. So this is what you're doing with this initiative. We'll be getting deep in our respective sectors so that we can understand the trends, we can understand the needs, we can understand the dynamics, we can keep our fingers on the pulse of changing skill and credential requirements. So this is where labor market intelligence comes into play. First of all, I think something that a lot of people don't really appreciate about labor market intelligence is that it provides us with a shared vocabulary. So when I say engineering, I'm referring to an industry within professional services sector that has its own staffing needs and patterns. When I say heavy and civil engineering construction, I'm referring to an entirely different industry in the construction sector that whose business model is different, whose staffing patterns are different, and the industry is affected by economic movements in a different way. Second, we can name and categorize. Whatever we can name and categorize, we can measure. So what do we know off the top of our heads? How many people are employed? Has employment gone up or down? What's the average pay in the industry? What's the average or median pay by occupation? What is the projected long-term outlook for the industry? LMI can help you, LMI is labor market intelligence, can help you interpret events in the world in terms of their implications for the sector. So for example, we're talking about renewable energy, and we know that I believe the price of a barrel of oil went up by $20 overnight with the invasion or the incursions into the Ukraine last night. And so you will be able to, by becoming familiar with your sector, you'll be able to interpret what's going to happen in that sector and be able to keep your finger on that pulse. We can even help you, and my team is here actually. Jason Timian worked with Focus New Jersey, with Kyle at Focus New Jersey, and will be presenting some data for you. I think they will be presenting to you who's hiring now and what their skill needs are. That's made possible by our ability to scrape the internet on a daily basis and scrape thousands and thousands of private and public online job boards. So that's really where we stand. And so we stand ready to work with you and provide you with the kind of labor market intelligence that you need. And more importantly, I think a lot of people are really used to seeing or hearing people get up and start, saying things that are really boring. I know that one time I was at a very large conference and I was introduced as somebody right after lunch that said, try to stay awake while Leslie talks about labor market intelligence. It's not boring. It really isn't. And I don't say that just because it's the way I make a living. It's really fascinating. And I think as you get engaged and understand how it relates to your work, particularly at the Centers of Workforce Innovation, I think it's going to be really, really, really enticing. The other thing is that combined with really open communication with the industry itself. And in this case, when we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about a lot of different industries, but all gathered around this sort of central theme of infrastructure, which is, as you know, huge right now, with hopefully Build Back Better someday, but also with the Infrastructure Act that actually was passed last November. And we're talking about renewable energy, which is also a lot of different industries. And it can be defined in a lot of different ways. So it'll be very, very exciting to engage with industry and also exchange information with them. We can tell them what we see in the data and they can tell us what's really happening on the ground. So in any case, I'm also happy to enter into that conversation and happy that my team is here and part of it. And I really look forward to opening that door and keeping that door open with NJCCC and NJBIA and the rest of the alphabet soup that's involved in this initiative. I'd love to go on and tell you more about what's happening in the labor market right now, but I'd love to make room for my team who's really dug more deeply into the industries that are relevant to our discussion today. So thank you so much for having me here, and enough with my ceremonial welcome. And I wish you all the best. And I'm going to be right by you, and hopefully we'll be working together and we'll succeed.
Thank you, Leslie, so much. We appreciate you being able to meet with us. Certainly, we value our partnership with you, and we look forward to many more meetings, right? I feel like once a week, maybe, there's a meeting, right? And always happy that you are a part, because what you add is so very critically important. Thank you. And Leslie actually has already queued up our next segment, which is the labor market landscape. We're fortunate enough to have Kyle Sullender. I always pause when I pronounce his last name. Kyle is the executive director of Focus NJ. Focus NJ is the nonprofit research arm created under the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. He is going to do our labor market presentation. And Jason Timian, Chief of Labor Market Information at the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, is going to join Kyle to answer some questions. Jason and his team create all the labor market information that many of us utilize every day so that we could better understand what's happening in industry in our state. So Jason and Kyle, take it away.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for that introduction, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning and to present this important information. As Leslie mentioned in her opening remarks, I'm going to do my best to make this as interesting and engaging as possible for everybody on the call. It is a little early in the morning, so I don't want to put anybody to sleep. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Kyle Sullender. I'm the executive director of Focus New Jersey. We are an independent research nonprofit conducting nonpartisan economic and workforce research to support sound public policy in New Jersey. Before I get started, of course, I want to give an extra thank you to Leslie and Jason and their teams at the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development in compiling the information that we're about to go over and also working with us so collaboratively to bring it to you this morning. For the next 20 or so minutes, I'll be providing as much of an overview as I can of the construction and utility sector in New Jersey, looking at various components of these industries, such as the size of the sectors and their relative components, the demographic compositions of them, the occupations which are currently in demand and which we think will be in demand in the coming years, as well as some other high-level insights. The goal, of course, of this discussion, as I think Aaron mentioned, is to assist the members of this collaborative in a level-setting effort as you then prepare to develop career pathway maps for students and lifelong learners to hopefully go on and achieve successful and sustainable careers in these fields in the years moving forward. A few final notes before we get started. There's a lot of information contained in these slides. We do not have the time to go over every bit of them today, and so there will be times that I'm moving a little faster for the information presented on the screen. You'll also notice me skipping a few slides here or there because these presentations have been put together to work for multiple audiences and multiple formats. So if you notice me sliding by some information, I didn't tap the button twice. We're just trying to make sure we hit the most relevant points in the time that we have allotted. One final note, as I mentioned yesterday, I haven't had the chance to call the Guinness Book of World Records yet. I do have what I'm confident is the world's squeakiest chair. So every time I blink, you might hear something in the background. No one's being hurt in my apartment. It's merely the chair underneath me. So with that said, why don't we get started and I will share my screen and we can begin to talk about this exciting information. Wonderful. So as we get started, I think the most useful item is probably to define exactly what we're measuring here before we get any more granular when we talk about the construction and utilities industries. I'll start on the right side of your screen because, as you can see, it's the smaller and simpler to define in terms of its various components. Here, when we talk about the utilities industry, we're predominantly describing the electrical power generation, transmission, and distribution fields, the transmission and distribution of natural gas, as well as water and sewer and other systems. On the construction side, things are a little bit more nuanced and complicated, and we see a little more variation. Here we're talking about our residential and non-residential building construction, our utility system construction, land subdivision, and a number of other areas that you see on the screen in front of you, and ones that we'll talk a little bit more about as we move forward. Now, as we move through this presentation, it's organized a little bit differently than some others I've given this week. What we'll be doing is flipping back and forth between these two industries. Although they're linked, they also differ, but we'll be jumping between them to show the demographic overview of construction and then of utilities, so that we can compare and contrast and also be a little more specific when we talk about them. Before we do that, however, I think it is useful to view the combined power of these industries in the state of New Jersey, especially with regards to total employment. So what you'll see here is that total employment figure for both construction and utilities beginning in the year 2015 and moving up through 2020. You'll notice that from 2015 to 2019, employment grew. We can measure this. It was a growth of about 8% over that 4-year period. Before that dip back from 174,000 jobs to about 165,000 in 2020. Obviously, in 2020, the industry was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, by the temporary shutdowns and restrictions that were put in place as a public health measure, and then also those lingering longer-term concerns that continue to be an issue in certain industries. And so as we move forward, we'll talk a little bit more about the impact or potential impact moving forward on some of the projections on the industry. Now, with that being said, let's start by examining the larger of our two industries, the construction industry. In general, the construction industry we can measure as accounting for about 151,000 total jobs in the year 2019. But that was in the year 2020, but that represented about a 5% decrease, as we noted a moment ago, from that 2019 average. And so it'll be interesting to see how that rebounds or doesn't rebound as we move out of the pandemic. When we talk about these workers, we're also typically talking about them being divided into 3 core components. These are our specialty trade contractors. This is the largest of the 3 components, those engaged in the construction of buildings, and then heavy and civil engineering, which I think Leslie mentioned in her opening remarks as well. Now, in addition to the specialty trade contractors position relative to the rest of the industry, here we can start to see the breakdown of these more specifically. So in that bottom left-hand side of your screen, that box graph in front of you, you'll notice that in addition to specialty trade contractors making up approximately 64% of the industry, roughly 23% then fall into that construction of buildings area, and then the remaining 12.7% falling into heavy and civil engineering. Overall, over the past 10 years, these 3 components have combined for an increase of about 22,500 jobs. And the total average growth for these 3 components and the industry over the past 10 years has been about 1.8% per year. Now, on the utilities side, we see a wide range of subcategories that help us to meet our energy requirements, but we've already noted kind of those main components a few slides ago. Now, there is a note about salary expectations on this slide, but I'm going to leave that for now, as we're going to talk a little bit more about salary expectations, average annual wages, as we move into the specific occupational groups and occupations that drive these industries forward a little bit later on in the presentation. First, I'd like to turn your attention to the final bullet on our slide, which notes the very small number of utility establishments in the state. There's only 380, and they account for just about 0.1% of the overall establishment units in New Jersey. As we'll talk about moving forward, the utility industry, although critical to New Jersey, is relatively small. And we'll dig a little deeper into those numbers and how they divide up as we move forward. So here we can see that number of employment, and this adds a little bit of context to what I just said. If you look at the line graph at the bottom of your screen, you'll note that in 2010, there were only about 14,500 utility jobs. And as we move forward to 2020, again, seeing that slight decline from 2018 to 2020 as we moved into the pandemic, we ended that year with an average annual employment of around 13.8 thousand jobs. So again, right around that 14,000 mark. When we talk about the construction side being in the 80,000 mark, you can see the disparity in terms of the size of the industries. In terms of how our components are divided, again, that pie chart in the left-hand screen, you'll notice that the largest component is our electric power generation, transmission, and distribution folks, making up roughly half of the utilities industry. And then we have natural gas distribution as our second largest segment, and then our water, sewage, and other systems folks. Now, if I were you, as the members of this collaborative and the folks on the call, My next question, having heard this information, would start to be, okay, but what are the specific jobs and where are they, as we start to think about who are we training and where do we need to train them? And those are great questions, and that's why I've prepared specifically to answer them next. And I'll be tackling them actually in reverse order. So excuse me as I skip past a number of slides here to get to this information. And so here we can see the geographic distribution of construction industry jobs throughout New Jersey. The first thing you'll note as you look at that color-coded map on the left side of your screen here is the very dark shades around our Newark labor area. Obviously here, darker shading meaning more jobs, lighter shading meaning fewer. So we'll quickly note that that darker shade is in the Newark area. But although the Middlesex Monmouth Ocean area right beneath it is a lighter shade, if we look at the chart on the right side of the screen, you'll notice that the total number of jobs in this area actually isn't that disparate. We're comparing about 41,000 to about 38,000 before we see a steeper drop off in our Bergen, Hudson, Passaic, and Camden areas. It should also note that this chart in particular isn't indexed against the population of these particular labor areas. So in many ways, it does make sense that we would see higher employment levels in some of our more densely packed areas than in some of our less densely packed areas. Now, before we discuss specific occupations in the construction industry, I think it's actually helpful to look at these occupational groups, as in a lot of ways, these might be even more enlightening than honing in on specific occupations, depending on the conversation that we're having. Now, these are broader categories, of course, that most of the occupations we'll discuss in a moment fall into. Looking at the pie chart on the left side of your screen, you'll note the majority of construction employees work in this area, noted construction and extraction occupations. This group notably includes construction laborers, which, as we'll address in a moment, is the largest individual occupation within the construction industry. In total, this group employs roughly 82,000 workers and pays an average salary of around $57,000. The second largest occupational group in the construction industry is our office and administrative support staff. I think this group is pretty self-explanatory. It accounts for roughly 20,000 workers, and it comes with an average salary of around $42,000. The third largest group is installation, maintenance, and repair. This includes heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration mechanics, notably, and employs roughly 15,000 workers. And again, we'll look more specifically at some of these individual occupations in just a moment. Together, these three occupational groups account for roughly 78% of the entire construction industry. And then we see that other category with a number of occupations and jobs filling in the remainder. With that, we can start to talk about specific jobs in the construction industry and zooming in a little bit on the groups that we outlined a moment ago. And you'll see the top 20 of those occupations laid out in front of you. As I noted a moment ago, construction laborers are the most common occupation within the construction industry. Just within this occupation, we see an employment level of roughly 17 to 18,000 individuals, and again, an average wage of around 59,000. Now, following them, we see some folks like our electricians, our carpenters, plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. And I promise I won't read to you this list of 20 folks. You do have it in front of you here, but also I should have mentioned at the onset when I mentioned information that we might not cover in these slides. These slides are available on the Department of Labor's website for public consumption. And I think if we haven't already, we can share that link in the chat if you'd like to look at any of these entries more specifically. But a few things that I will note that jump out to me as I look at this chart is first the educational requirements of these extremely common occupations within this sector. As you look down the rightmost side of the chart in front of you, you'll notice that 75% of these most common occupations require a high school diploma or less in order to enter the occupation. And yet there are jobs on this list that line up with those educational requirements that pay at or above the statewide average annual wage of around $74,000 to $76,000. Electricians, for example, as we noted, are the second most common occupation on this list, pay an average wage of $76,000 despite needing just a high school diploma or equivalent in order to get started. We'll also note sales representatives in the field, slightly different, but an average wage of $89,000, again, despite requiring only a high school diploma to get started. Now, one note on these educational requirements is that these are general guides. These certainly are not steadfast rules that apply to every company or every business, and they're individual requirements for any given occupation. But broadly speaking, across the industry, these are useful guides to know what the requirements are in order to get into one of these common occupations. Now, with this, I think it is useful to now view the same breakdowns in the utility industry. And so again, we can start to look at the occupational groups here. The three most common being the installation, maintenance, and repair area. This is our most common group, accounting for roughly 5,400 jobs or 5,500 jobs in the state, equaling about a third of this industry. And this includes folks like our electrical power line installers, another group very common that we'll be talking about in a moment. And then we see roughly equal proportions of the industry being engaged in our utilities production area, as well as our office and administrative support. And then what's actually our second largest area in those other categories, but that don't quite fit into any of these one occupational groups. One thing I will mention, as we noted at the top, the utilities industry being smaller than the construction utility, or I'm sorry, the construction industry as a whole, you'll notice that even these numbers of the occupational groupings, 5,400, 1,800, are quite a bit smaller than the occupational groupings we saw in the construction area a moment ago. So with that, we can again start to look at the more specific occupations that make up this industry. And we'll see a similar story to the one that I told a moment ago with regards to the construction industry. Of the 20 most common occupations in the utilities industry, you'll note that 65% of them require a high school diploma or less in order to get started. Now, that being said, one caveat, the most common occupation in this industry does require a bachelor's degree. These are our electrical power line installers and repairers that comes with an average wage of about $95,000 a year, but they're the most common by a relatively small number. If you look in around the middle of the chart here, employment level at that occupation is around 960, but our first line supervisors of mechanics here is just under that at 940. That is a job that requires only a high school diploma. Heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration mechanics, which is a fast growing field, we'll talk about that in a moment, requires a post-secondary non-degree award. And so again, we see this story of relatively high paying jobs, especially compared to the statewide average, requiring less than that 4-year degree, which is certainly different than some of the list of these occupations that we've seen in other fields and industries as we've met with the collaboratives this week. Now, finally, before we talk more about the outlook for these jobs and others, I want to step back one more time and talk about who currently fills these jobs and the demographic makeup of these industries as they stand today. And we'll go one at a time, but we will notice that these are relatively similar between the construction and utilities industries, although I'll point out the differences as we get to them. So firstly, the pie charts to the upper right-hand side of your screen here, you'll notice that the construction industry is predominantly male-driven. There are roughly 9 men for every 1 woman in the construction industry, and this is obviously an outlier with regards to the state as a whole, where we see male and female employment divided roughly 52 to 48, but essentially split in half. We also see that the construction industry is a little less diverse than our industries as a whole in New Jersey. The workforce is predominantly white, about 80%, whereas the rest of the state is usually around 67, 68%. We see Black and African American workers being underrepresented in the construction industry as well, making up just about 5% of the workforce, as opposed to about 13% of New Jersey's workforce as a whole. We also see Asian workers underrepresented, and this other category, other racial demographics, being slightly overrepresented compared to the state as a whole. I'll also note on the bottom of the screen that Hispanic workers tend to make up more of the industry than they make up of the New Jersey workforce in totality. We're looking at about 31% versus about 20%. Now, we can also look at the age cohort of the construction industry, which tells an interesting story as we start to think about who will be training moving forward and the number of folks that will have to be replaced as they reach retirement age. This is obviously a conversation in all industries, looking at these age demographics as the baby boom generation reaches that age of retirement or starts to creep up to it, and whether or not that will create a gap between demand and the workforce supply. In terms of age, the number of older construction workers has accelerated quite a bit in the past 20 years. So we see the number of those age 65 and over, that's increased by about 189%. Looking at the top of this color chart on the right side of your screen, you'll note that those over 65 still make up a relatively small percentage of the overall workforce, but that percentage is growing as we go from 2000 to 2019. Similarly, the number of those over 55 has increased by about 151%. And there you'll see a much larger cohort, that 55 to 64 range. That being said, although the 35 to 54 age group has decreased by about 1,300 workers over the span, it's still the largest group in the industry, accounting for just over 1/4 of all workers in the industry. We can look at the same metrics for the utility industry now, and we'll see a lot of the same trends playing out. Once again, in the utility industry, the workforce is predominantly male. We're talking about an 80 to 20 split between men and women, so not as dramatic as the construction industry, but still far more dramatic than the split across New Jersey's workforce as a whole. We also see that, again, the workforce in the utilities industry tends to be less diverse than New Jersey's workforce as a whole, but in different ways than the construction industry. So here again, we see about 80% of the workforce being white versus 68% of the workforce of New Jersey as a whole, but we see Black and African American individuals being closer to their statewide representation. We do see a more dramatic drop off between Asian workers, though, at around 4% of the utilities industry versus 10% of New Jersey as a whole. And other workers have also shrunk. They were a larger group in our construction industry. Hispanic workers have also shifted dramatically. In the construction industry, we talked about them accounting for roughly 30% of employment, whereas in the utilities industry, it's about 9%. And so again, comparing them to their position relative to the larger New Jersey workforce, the trend is slightly different in the utility industry than in construction. With regards to age, again, we see a similar story in the utilities industry here. Workers 65 and older have tripled over the past 20 years, and the number of workers over 55 has doubled to account for nearly 1/3 of the workforce. The trend is also slightly different here, where the cohort of 35 to 54-year-olds has actually decreased. In the year 2000, we were looking at that cohort being about 2/3 of all employment in the industry. Now it's fallen to less than half. And so we do see this aging workforce as we move forward over the past 20 years. Now, finally, I'm going to conclude with a few remarks about projections for these industries moving forward. And then we've set aside a couple of minutes at the end of the presentation to also take any questions that may have popped up in the chat or that you may have as we conclude. Before I do switch slides, though, to these projections, I will note, as we've addressed with the other collaborative meetings, is that these projections were made prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know the Department of Labor is planning to update their projections later this year to try to take some of those changes into consideration. But I still think that the pre-pandemic projections are a very useful barometer for where things were heading and can give us an indication of where things would have been without the pandemic. And then we can start to talk about, well, what trends has the pandemic layered onto those? Because certainly the pandemic did not erase what was happening prior to COVID-19. And so again, we'll start with construction, as we have with each of these categories. You'll notice that the fastest growing occupation here is actually our plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. If we're comparing it by the growth percentage on the right side of your screen, you'll see them at about 18%. And then our heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration workers at about 15%. And I noted them when we went through the individual occupations, again, being a relatively large occupation within the field. And then we see here that it's also relatively fast growing. So that demand is continuing to increase even with the relative size of the occupation within the industry. Electricians were another very large occupation within the construction industry, and we see that they are continuing to grow. That demand has not been met. Electricians over the next 6 years now, but these projections were built out to measure the rate of change from 2018 to 2028. We see a growth rate of about 11%. And so again, I won't read this list to you. You can peruse it as we work through the slides or again, refer to it later, but we see a number of these extremely common occupations already and continuing to increase in their size as we move forward. And when we talk about those lower barriers to entry and those higher relative wages, we see occupations here which could be extremely strong fits for individuals looking to enter a trade or to enter the industry. Finally, we can look at these same projections on the utilities side, where we'll see our electrical power line repairs, once again, our most common occupation already in the industry, being our fastest growing at about 12%, and just under them our electrical and electronic repairers at about 11%. We have supervisors continuing to increase in demand as well, but I will note as you look through this list and you look through the various growth rates associated with the occupations one final time, the relative size of this industry compared to the construction industry that we combine it with. Whereas 2 slides ago, we talked about roofers, for example, which already, or we'll go to electricians again, where they account for about 15,000 jobs already. And we're talking about adding 1,600 more jobs over this 10-year span. If we flip forward back to the utilities sector, our electrical power line installers, which is the most common occupation, only accounts for fewer than 1,000 jobs. So that rate of change, while high, is still only about 110 extra jobs over this period. And so it's important to recognize that growth and to recognize the opportunity to fill those jobs. But it's also important to look beyond that growth rate alone and look at that raw number of jobs that are being created, because that'll impact the number of folks that have to be trained in order to fill them. With that being said, that is the conclusion of my portion of this presentation. I want to thank you all for your time and attention. And as we noted at the top, hopefully everybody is still awake. At this point, I'd like to bring Jason back onto the screen to answer any questions that you may have. And I want to thank you again. And at this point, I'll turn it over to our moderators to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Kyle. First, I want to thank you, Leslie, for joining us this morning and for your valuable insight. I love how excited you are about LMI data. I feel like I get like that with my kids when they were in school. I'm like, but math is fun. Come on, guys. So appreciate that pep talk. And I think that all of us clearly are embracing this great information. Kyle, thank you for presenting it in such a terrific and engaging way. We do have some questions that were in the chat. But first, I want to introduce myself. Welcome, everybody. I am Stephanie Staub. I'm the Director of Infrastructure and Energy Sectors for the New Jersey Pathways to Career Opportunities Initiative. I have with us our whole team, but I want to point out Stephanie Samuel is our program manager, and she's been kind of monitoring the chat. So please feel free to keep throwing some questions on there and she'll feed them over to us. So first, I want to just say that the one kind of glaring thing that I took away from your presentation, and really, I guess part is my knowledge from, coming from the construction industry, is the age distribution of the workforce. I really think that is worth noting. I think it's great. It appears as though the workers are staying until retirement, which is a great thing, right? Like they see that is a career. But looking at that younger age category, I'm just curious if you have data regarding the average age of an employee entering the industry. So I don't know, Jason.
We don't know. No, we collect data through a partner with the U.S. Census Bureau by age band, and you saw each of those spreads put on the graph that Kyle shared. But you do see
you're breaking up, Jason.
In the world.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll give Jason a moment to get back online here, and I will just note, pulling up this slide again, I certainly I don't have any data regarding when folks enter the workforce, but as we look at that the chart that was on the screen previously, that cohort of,
and it does appear that the lower age cohorts aren't growing as fast. Hello,
I'm getting
Now
Jason's
we got you back. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got you back, Jason.
We lost
you for a minute
for a
there.
second.
He's frozen again, but that's a nice smile he's frozen on. I can tell you that we don't have information, quantitative information about what the average age is for people entering, because we don't have information about how many years of experience a person has in a particular occupation. But that is precisely the kind of thing that we would want to know, by talking to construction employers. I think that's really, a really good point. Do you have an Ethernet cable, Jason, or you want to come in here? All right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
He's
I
right
was
next
gonna
door to me,
point
so
out,
he's going to come here.
Technology's great until it isn't.
It is,
Well, but
yes.
it's interesting because you guys are in the same building. I love that.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm going to take my background off so that you can see him.
No worries. Okay, well, we're going to go to the next one. We have a great question here from Monique Baptiste from JP Morgan Chase. She's asking, do you have the demographic breakdown by earnings or occupation classification in either sector?
That's doable. Absolutely. Do we have a demographic breakdown by occupational group? We can do that.
We can get that from
Yeah.
ACS Palms, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we can start taking a list of what you need.
Okay, terrific. Perfect. Okay, so another question from the chat, and we knew that this one was coming, right? So as we start to spend the 12 billion New Jersey allocation of the Infrastructure Act, do you see the labor unions accepting more members into their ranks, specifically from underserved communities? And how can our vocational institutions help?
Well, one of the things, I don't think I can speak to what the labor unions are or aren't going to do, but I can tell you that we have a pretty major investment in a program. I always get it wrong, called NJ Builders Utilization Initiative for Labor Diversity. So it's millions of dollars every year for apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships that, it's going to go on ad infinitum, and it's for, for construction trades. So the hope is that we can make a dent with that, but I would really, really love to see the schools working together with industry to have that conversation. I mean, it was really, really clear what an opportunity there is. If you have an aging, an aging workforce, our workforce, the young workforce is much more diverse than our older workforce. And you can see how underrepresented minority and women particularly, I mean, those are huge opportunities. So I would hope that the schools and NJ Build could work with the industries.
Absolutely terrific. And I know that there's a large focus on that. I mean, I agree. I cannot speak for the building trades either, but I just being in that section, I know that there's a lot of emphasis on non-traditional, women in non-traditional careers. So there is a huge focus on attracting that new workforce. And I'm really excited, this little tip up for the next segment of our innovative partnerships. And I think you're going to hear some really terrific and innovative ways that the construction industry is working in labor unions together with education to increase that. So that's a great little segue into our next feature.
Stephanie,
Another question.
I'm sorry, if I can
Sure.
jump in before we ask the next one. I just wanted to note, I think this also presents a phenomenal opportunity to increase awareness of these occupations and of these fields, and also a generational shift perhaps in the way that they are viewed with this influx of funding to create a lot of these positions and to do a lot of these projects. So hopefully there will be an opportunity to increase interest in them as well.
Absolutely. Agreed. And that kind of also dovetails into a comment that was in the chat. And Leslie, we appreciate you commenting, but I want to just read it for everyone in case they missed it. So a question was posed, given that so many of these jobs require a high school degree or less, what steps are taken to create green career pathways of study at the vocational and high school level? And Leslie, you responded, excellent question. We would need to look at labor supply data on students in green construction CTE programs and schools. And this deck is more closely focused on demand. But that really is a huge focus of this Career Pathways Initiative, is linking high school programs and creating awareness for jobs within these industries and creating the linkages from high school through the college so that you can progress to a career. So it's very much in line with what we're doing. So thank you, Leslie, for responding to that. I want to, so we mentioned, Aaron mentioned earlier that the Pathways Initiative specifically within our infrastructure and energy collaborative that we have 2 centers of workforce innovation, construction and renewable energy. Can you speak to any of the data here that relates to renewable energy? I mean, I know that you mentioned it earlier and that with the focus on things taking place in New Jersey that you'll be updating it, but any comments you can make about the data that we saw today that relates to renewable energy?
Sure. Well, construction overall is very cyclical and tends to follow the national economic wave. Construction fell dramatically, especially during the Great Recession, but has rebounded quite well. Even last year, the dip in construction employment really wasn't that bad. And as Kyle mentioned earlier, we don't anticipate the 2018-2028 projections to be altered too greatly because of it. I did look up information on the wind industry. So it is a very detailed classification that we collected data on. So I did it at the national level. And I did see over the past 10 years that employment in this industry has increased more than twofold. And with talk of all the wind investment down in South Jersey, I would anticipate there to be great opportunity for job growth down there.
Yeah, I think I would love to chime in that, I know Aaron has been speaking with the Wind Institute, which is located at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. And they've had their finger on the pulse of what's going on. My understanding of what's going on right now is that it will take some time before we get to the point where we're going to have wind energy jobs. What will happen first is that we're going to have turbine assembly jobs and transportation jobs that will need to move those turbines from the port in Paulsboro over to the shore. There's also going to be, an expanded port and a manufacturing location over in Salem, I believe. Paulsboro is the port and Salem, I believe, is the manufacturing. Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong. But first we're looking at a lot of construction, underwater welders. We happen to know that we don't have any underwater welding classes right now. So I think, Aaron and Jen have discussed that and looking at how we can build on our existing MIG welding classes that we have in South Jersey and try to train people for underwater welding. So that's definitely for sure something that we can be looking at. But that's the kind of detail that you can only know when I think what I was, the point I was making is you need to be a sector specialist, because you could say, it's going to grow, but you really need to understand what's going to happen in New Jersey and what's sort of the sequence of events. As far as PV is concerned, that it gets cheaper and more, and more attractive all the time. I made that comment about the rising price of oil. I think if that lasts a really long time, then we're going to be seeing greater investments in photovoltaic, cells and installation of solar energy. I heard Governor Murphy online last night in Talk to the Governor, I think at WNYC, and somebody asked him about nuclear energy, and he basically said, while he's open to the idea, that's not a direction that he's seeing a lot of movement in New Jersey.
Thank you very much, Leslie. So in that same kind of vein, we do have another question in the chat from Robert Bennett. How are the job classifications in the construction and utilities area going to address and start to reflect the new resource requirements? For instance, like EV charging station grids, 5G, private network, collection connectivity, urban and rural broadband build out and smart grid. And finally, renewable energy, solar, wind design, engineering, installation, construction, maintenance. I think you addressed that, but can you speak to the first half of that?
Yeah, sure. So the BLS sets forth our classification systems, both for industry and occupation. Unfortunately, they tend to be outdated by the time they come up, and they don't update as frequently. However, as Leslie mentioned earlier, we do have the ability to extract information from online job postings, which obviously are updated more frequently. The data set that we pull from is updated every day so that we are able to see these emerging types of job titles in real time.
And again, I think that's, as the data catches up to the reality on the ground, we will be able to see, for example, where electricians work. even though we saw electricians within the construction industry, we might see electricians in other industries as well. And so, that's really important thing to keep in mind is that although we're focusing on a sector, the occupations within that sector might be employable in other places. So I think, Robert, to that point, it's a really complex question, and it's going to be best answered through a process of back and forth with employers. And I think, I hate to punt that one, but I think that's the best answer we can give.
I have one other note on that too, in that construction is very susceptible to independent contractors for which we do not collect data because of the way they file their taxes. So there is a piece of those tradespeople that may not be in the total count. So.
Okay, perfect. So I just two little observations from me reviewing the LMI data. And I don't remember, Kyle, if these were on the slides that you had to move forward on, but first thing is, it was interesting to see that the number of establishments in the construction of buildings has increased by 8%, yet the annual average employment has remained flat over the same 5-year period, right? So the number of companies working in that industry increased, but employment remained flat. So is that attributed to things such as new technology or construction methodologies? So you're able to do more with less workers, or is there some other reason for the data to present that way? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would just say yes to everything you just said. I think technology is changing and is becoming a bit more nuanced, so that maybe you do need fewer bodies in the shop to perform the same work. The work is so much different than it used to be, so you're going to have a lot of smaller establishments, than maybe all these larger home builders and such.
It could also speak to the average size of the firms themselves. So that the smaller firms are growing, or we're seeing more smaller firms,
Terrific.
Which could be caused by technology.
Right, agreed.
Great.
And then one last observation on my part was and you did touch on these slides. So combining information from 2 data sets, building equipment contractors are the largest employer of all specialty trade contractors, right? And that number of contractors has increased. Combining that with the occupations like HVAC, which ranked 3rd largest occupation group when you had that overall slide of the top 20 occupations within construction and utilities. So just looking at that, it appears as though, right, that is completely in line with the state's energy goals, right? And whether it's homeowners or businesses, HVAC and more energy efficiency. So the focus, even in these industries, clearly is energy related, right? Would you say that's an accurate observation, right? So beyond the newer technologies that are coming out, we're still HVAC, and that is still a very strong occupation and part of the energy goals.
Great observation, Stephanie. I also think what you raised for me is that, Generation Y and millennials tend to be really attracted to jobs that have a purpose. And, in addition to a lot of other stuff that we've been hearing, but I think more and more so younger people really want jobs that are meaningful. And so that could be a really nice way, a nice recruitment, a marketing mechanism. I think what we're seeing potentially, it's really worthwhile asking around why it is that we don't see as many young people coming into construction. Is it because it doesn't seem like it's an attractive career, and what can we do about that if that's the way that younger people are looking at it? But I think we could be looking at the opportunities that are available, to Robert Bennett's point, within renewable energy and really making a difference for the planet.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for today for presentation. Kyle, you present the information, the data in a very engaging way. Jason, we appreciate your being here to help answer questions. And Leslie, very special treat to have you here, not just to present and talk about the importance of this information, but to engage in this question and answer, we really are very thankful and appreciative of your time. This has been great conversation. It is important foundational information, and it really speaks to the Pathways Initiative and the value of an education ecosystem. I like the ecoverse, Leslie. I think maybe we should consider adopting that terminology, and really the partnerships that are formed through this collaborative, right? So truly substantial partnerships, which brings us to the next portion of our program. So thank you very much for joining us. If we could go through, realign our speakers for our innovative pathways to partnerships. I want to welcome and introduce our collaborative partners who are going to speak next. So welcome Kate Gibbs. Kate is the Deputy Director of Engineers Labor Employer Cooperative. And we will welcome Burl Yearwood, who is our Associate Dean of STEM at Hudson County Community College. They're going to have or share an innovative pathways partnership regarding the current class of operating engineers 825 apprentices and Hudson County Community College. This partnership highlights the value and advantages that result from aligning non-traditional partners. I am extremely excited to have you all hear this segment, because I think it speaks to a lot of the data that we just heard, specifically male dominated, specifically the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think this pathway and this partnership in of itself also will help reach into that next generation of workers. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Burl. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I know Burl and I are really excited to talk today about this unique partnership. And Local 825 Operating Engineers is a statewide labor union representing mostly heavy equipment operators in the entire state of New Jersey and 5 counties in New York. And something that our local has been really focused on in recent years, because the nature of our work is so tied to equipment. As technologies advance, automation and GPS tools, the equipment is becoming more technical. And so we want to make sure that we're moving with the industry and that our workforce is prepared for not only the jobs of today, the jobs of tomorrow, to be the ones who can not only use this new equipment and this new technology, but be able to fix it, repair it on a job site and move on. And so we really wanted to move towards a more technical focus and wanted to create new opportunities for our existing members, the ability to attract new members. And so adding this educational component was something that we've been working on for a few years. When we embarked on this partnership, we were in the process of obtaining our New Jersey licensure. So we needed an academic partner in order to try this, pilot cohort. And so Hudson County Community College has been a great partner with us. We sought a grant from the New Jersey Department of Labor and were able to secure a grant to fund this first cohort of apprentice students that will be taking classes at Hudson County Community College at the same time as they're going through our apprentice program, and being able to get credits from the academic institution for the classroom and on-the-job work that they're learning through our apprentice program. So Burl is going to talk to you a little bit first about the education side of things, and then I'll come back in to discuss some of the value that we've seen from the partnership and ways that we think we can expand this, not only for our industry, but operating engineers work on all of our infrastructure, from roads and bridges, water, energy, buildings. So we really do touch a wide array of work, including renewables. The work that we do for a solar field or for a wind installation is very similar to other work we've done. And so making sure that we're marrying those gaps is something that we continue to work on. And Burl, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the technical studies aspect of the program.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Stephanie, and everyone else for having us here. We are very happy to share our partnership and talk about it. So as Stephanie mentioned, I'm Burl Yearwood. I'm from Hudson County Community College, which is located in Jersey City. Jersey City is a very ethnically diverse area. It's also an area that's experiencing an incredible growth in construction and business. And so we think the college is well placed to help in this area. So I'm going to specifically give a very brief description of the technical studies degree and then point out part of what we at the college valued about this partnership. So the technical studies degree at Hudson, this is a degree program meant to award credit to folks who have work-life experience. So the program awards 27 credits to individuals who completed a certified apprenticeship program or have completed corporate, industrial, or military training programs. So at Hudson, the students in this program would take 21 credits of general education courses. The students also have the opportunity to focus their studies in one of 4 areas. They can focus in business, computer science, computer technology, or electronics engineering technology. We're also willing to work with employers and trade unions to create a new area of concentration that more aligns to either what a business is looking for their employees to have skills, the skills they need, trade unions. So I think this is a very innovative program. Most community colleges have a program similar to this. And again, I think it provides an opportunity to have students coming in and not start from zero. They come in and instead of having to complete 60 credits and take anywhere from 2 to 4 years, because of their life experience, they are rewarded credits for that. In terms of the partnership with Local 825, so this is a partnership, a type of collaboration that we value. We recognize that Hudson cannot replicate the skills and knowledge learned in apprenticeship programs or training programs. However, we also recognize that our college can enhance those skills and knowledge through our course offerings. So we can expand and offer new opportunities to employees. For example, the opportunity to learn business management courses, or to learn computer programming skills, or to learn, get a base scientific knowledge that supports or broadens what individuals in industry are doing. And so we've worked with Local 825 to advise their apprentices, to register them as students, schedule their classes, and answer questions that they may have. So this is a personalized experience that by making it so personalized, we're hoping to help Local 825 apprentices to succeed. We've created an articulation agreement with Local 825 so that future apprentices, they have a structure to follow. So they know what to expect, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time a new cohort comes to the college. And so, we think that this type of partnership can serve as a model that can be expanded to other community colleges in New Jersey. We believe that the New Jersey community colleges can leverage the benefits and socioeconomic mobility that we offer to our students. We can leverage this by creating partnerships to produce a better trained workforce. And we think ultimately this benefits everyone. I'll turn it over to Kate to talk about the partnership from the union's point of view.
Well, thanks, Burl. And as you mentioned, one of the while technical studies does have those concentrations now, we're working on a curriculum to have a heavy equipment operator concentration under that technical studies. So it's a real-time example of the way that HCCC can work with an industry partner to come up with something really specific that meets the needs. And so what we have, as we've embarked on this educational journey, we've seen in academia that academia has struggled to replicate the type of training and apprenticeship and on-the-job apprenticeship and training that unions have been doing for over 100 years and doing really well. At the same time, we can't do the academic side the way that these other institutions have been doing it for over 100 years. And so I think in New Jersey, with there's such an opportunity here, especially with all of the federal investment that's coming here, and the way that our economy is completely changing in terms of our energy systems, technology, there's a huge opportunity. And so allowing us to, instead of trying to make worse versions of what each other do really well, let's partner. And so if we do workforce training and apprenticeship really well, and our academic partners can handle the general studies and the business focused things, the more technical parts of it, it allows for us to do what we each do really well, and the student gets the benefit of both successful experiences with both the academic partner and at our training center. We have some photos there of our training grounds, and pictured there is our business manager, Greg Lalevee, with the president of HCCC signing the articulation agreement. So, one of the reasons that we moved towards an education focus was not only to be able to better adapt with new technologies and to prepare a better workforce for our employers, is that there are very strict guidelines for how an apprenticeship program application process can go. And that is to avoid the kind of nepotism and corruption that happened, decades ago. But unfortunately, because those standards and those processes are so rigid, it doesn't allow us to really work on our diversity goals that we have, bringing more veterans, women, and people of color. And so by having a Department of Education focus, we can have diversity goals for our educational institution. So by operating this cohort of 30 students under, we had to change our JATC, which is a federal board that basically says your process for how you do apprentices is okay. We had to change that to make sure that it had that education balance. And with this class of 30 students, we're really happy to report that the changes we made allowed us to bring in, of those 30 students, we have 7 veterans, 7 women, and 10 people that identify as non-white. So you see that in a class of 30, we've already been able to make a huge difference. We just continue to look forward to making sure that these opportunities are available, not only for legacy members. Unionism used to be, well, my dad was an operating engineer, my grandfather was an operating engineer. And while we still want to encourage legacy membership, because it is a great career path, we want to make sure that these opportunities are available for anyone and everyone, because they are careers. This is not a job. Operating engineers, our normal apprenticeship program is 4 years, and in partnership with academics, it'll be more of a 5-year program. So the investment they're making in themselves is the same as a student, putting in the hard time in a more typical academic setting. And the great thing about this program is, and why we called it Earn and Learn, is that while they're earning their degree, they're earning their journeyman status as apprentices, they're actually getting to work on the job and earn money. And so it's a really, really great partnership, especially for the folks that coming from disadvantaged communities, because you can almost immediately start earning some degree of money. And that way it's a great opportunity for, we have apprentices who came in as young single mothers, and, we're looking for a new path, and they were able to, while being apprentices, make money and have a career that could, not only put food on the table, but provide for healthcare, more training, and retirement on the back end. So we see tremendous value in the ability to partner as a trade organization with academic partners. Because we are statewide, we would love to take the partnership with HCCC statewide and partner with as many community colleges, as would like to. We think we bring a significant amount of value with our 2 state-of-the-art training centers. Everybody who has been on the New Jersey Turnpike has probably seen our training center at Exit 8A. We have another one in New York. We have training instructors that are asked to speak around the country because the level of training and professionalism at our training center really is top notch, even among the International Union of Operating Engineers, because New Jersey's infrastructure is so much more complicated because of the nature of we're older, we're densely populated. And, in Minnesota, you can close a road down and it doesn't, in New Jersey, you want to try to fix an intersection, it can cause a major problem. So, we do have different challenges. And I think that the value that our union and every trade collectively, the New Jersey Building Trades Union spend $100 million every year on training and apprenticeship. And that's all private investment. So I think it's a great opportunity to leverage the existing private investment that we've made with our academic partners to create, new pathways to a career. And even for our existing membership who have already gone through the apprentice program, become journeymen, may want to be able to get credits for what they went through, and also learn estimating, blueprint reading, or they want to become an owner operator themselves. A lot of our signatory contractors are family owned owner operator, operations. And so you might be a really great crane operator, but not such a great business person. And so being able to take some business management classes can help our existing members upskill and possibly become, leaders within organized labor. And becoming to work for the union and doing a role similar to what I do. So I just can't speak enough about the partnership. It's been really great working with HCCC, and we look forward to taking questions because I'm sure there will be some. And we have mine and Burl's email addresses up there for you if you have any questions that you want to ask offline or follow up. And that's just a photo of our classrooms at our training center.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate and Burl. I mean, that really is an incredible partnership. And, after hearing that LMI data that Kyle presented earlier, the outcomes of this program, what you really were able to realize because of this, really innovative partnership, it just can't be understated. So thank you so much. Stephanie is going to put a link in the chat. We found a great article back in November from National Apprenticeship Week when you announced the partnership. So there's some really good information there. So that'll be in the chat for anybody who wants to read that and get some more information. I also want to point out, and thank you, Kate. Now, obviously you mentioned the legacy of your family within the trade, but, feel necessary to recognize how great it is to have a female representing the operating engineers in this segment, right? Like talking about diversity. And it's a nice segue to let folks know that March is actually Women in Construction Week. March, the first week, so it would actually be the first full week. So I think it starts March 7th or 8th. That is Women in Construction Week. So hopefully we'll see a lot of activity around that to help, get more females in the trades. But clearly this partnership and this program and the ability for, I think it speaks to really the need for the career pathways and what we're doing of bringing folks together, right? So all of us involved in workforce development, training, and education do what we do independently, and many do it extremely well. And when you're able to take those strong partners and link them together, you just become even stronger. So it's terrific to see how that partnership really had a positive effect on your outcomes. So folks, please do put some questions in the chat. We have one here. Michael Schloff says, thank you, Kate and Burl. What mechanisms are you using to reach students, and how early are you going in your outreach?
So for us, I mean, we are, we go to career days at high schools. We speak, standard high schools. I sit on the board of the Construction Industry Career Day Council, which is an annual event where we invite every high school in the state to come, and we have booths set up with all 15 building trades, but we also have our contractors, engineers, all different facets of the construction industry exhibit so that high school students, it's a free event. We even have scholarships for districts that can't afford to bus their kids. We have scholarships where we can pay for the buses. We want to get earlier. And one of the things we wanted to focus on, in addition to veterans, women, and people of color, was vocationally focused students. And so that was one of the other items that we would have given an extra score on their rubric to. We didn't have any students. One of the things that I feel really strongly about, I'm a former freeholder from Burlington County. I served on our our community college, our vocational school, and our special services school district. And it's really a statewide problem. Before the pandemic, as of 2019, there were 18,000 students in the state of New Jersey who wanted a seat at a vocational high school and could not get one. So there's two problems. Number one, we need more seats for kids in this state. That's bottom line. No matter if you're in an SDA district, a regular district, a vocational, we need more seats. But the fact that there's 18,000 kids who say, I want a vocational path, and they're not getting it. And I know for a fact that a lot of seats that are taken in county vocational schools are taken by students who are trying to escape a failing school district. And they might be college. Most of them are college bound. In BCIT, the Burlington County Institute of Technology, most of them were on career majors, not vocational. And so and 90% of them came from two districts that were, not great school districts. And so, while of course we want every student to have a pathway, and we don't want to leave a kid who wants to go to college in a school that's failing, that's not right. But it's also not right to then say, well, now those college bound students are taking seats that are actually for people who say, no, I want to be an electrician, or I want to be an operator. And now we don't have that vocational seat. So I think altogether, that's something that people on this call and advocates need to start thinking about and addressing, because it is a huge problem. And we're failing both the kid in the failing school district, and we're failing the kid that wants to go to a vocational school. And so when we talk about how do we, destigmatize, it drives me, I'm like, we're not addressing the real problem here.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is, the mindset of guidance counselors. When I was in high school, my best friend told our guidance counselor she wanted to be an electrician, and she handed her 2 pamphlets for the local beauty schools. And my friend said, no, I worked with my uncle this summer. I really want to I want to be an electrician. And she said, well, these are the 2 beauty schools in the area. She went to beauty school, took out $20,000 in loans, and never even took the test, never did hair. She didn't want to do hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that there was, in the past, a significant stigma towards trades, especially I think for people of color and for women, but we all, I think, can do better. So I know that's a lot for a small question, but it's something I feel really strongly about.
Absolutely. And I do think there is a large focus on getting to those other populations and changing that old mindset of, women in these types of careers. So I look forward to having more innovative programs that are attracting women and an underserved populations into the trades, because we need more workers, and that is a terrific population, right? To increase the help with supply and demand, and also just increasing diversity, equity, inclusion is the right thing to do. Like Leslie mentioned earlier, the younger generation wants to have work towards a cause, right? And construction jobs and all these different career paths really play into that. And so including everybody in that is really important. So I'm going to just do one final question, because we're coming on the 11:30 mark. And it's a question from me. I am curious, both for you, Kate, and Burl, how do you envision expanding this program?
I know on behalf of the college, I think, as I mentioned, we are looking to, use this as a model for expansion. So, we're looking to work with other trade unions, work with businesses to see what do they want, how can we help them? Even as part of our center and working with Roland, we're seeing what they're doing in Southern New Jersey, what we're doing in Northern New Jersey, and, how can we sort of leverage what we're doing? So this partnership, the more we inform people about it, and the more we, reach out to folks, even the people, Kate mentioned guidance counselors, so letting them know that there are these opportunities that, not every student is going to go to a 4-year school. Not every student wants to, but many don't realize that there are these partnerships, these opportunities available to them. So, part of expanding this is letting people know about it, being open and being flexible to change in curriculum, which is not something that colleges are very good at, in the past, but I think we've gotten much better. So we're looking to work with our, other trade unions. We're looking to work with our sister community colleges. We're looking to work with nonprofits. We're looking to work with businesses to sort of produce this type of partnership.
Absolutely. And I think our Construction Center of Workforce Innovation, right, is focused on doing just that. So I thank you both for being with us today and featuring and highlighting this terrific partnership. Really look forward to watching it grow and to be able to work with others in the industry to replicate what you're doing. So thank you both for being with us. And I want to thank everyone who's online with us for joining us today. Welcome Catherine back, and we can go through our final goodbyes. Okay, so I'll handle that. Oh, there we go, Catherine, thank you.
Great. Thank you all for spending these 90 minutes with us. We'll be meeting every month. Just want to point out to you that you can get involved, sign up at our website. You can use this QR code or just go to njpathways.org to get involved so that you receive all the meeting invitations and all the updates. Also, would like to point out our March meeting dates for all of our collaborative meetings. We have one more collaborative this week to round out the 4, and that is tomorrow at 10 a.m. That collaborative meeting is for manufacturing and supply chain management. We will have another robust program planned, and these are the March dates and times. Again, if you are already signed up to participate in this collaborative, or any of our collaboratives, you will receive a blast email invitation for these meetings. We will drop a link right now in the chat for a survey. We'd like to receive your feedback about this meeting, but more importantly, we'd like for you to tell us about other innovative pathways partnerships that you have so that we can highlight you and allow you to present at upcoming collaborative meetings. This is really about all the work we do together to increase access to education and training throughout the state by working together, which is why all of the education partners are here and are working together. No more do we want to have these silos where we're each doing our bit really and not leveraging the resources that we collectively have, which are a lot more than any resources we have individually. So we're very excited about this initiative and we're looking forward to you all participating. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.